Hello, my name is Dr. Lisa Magdalena Hess, Professor of Practical Theology at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. Thank you for clicking in to listen, to learn a little bit about United or to hear a little bit about what Spirit's been about in my faith journey in my 18 years here at United. My journey of faith at United is indelibly marked by Spirit's winks, nudges, sometimes outright pushes into unexpected, unfamiliar, faithful endeavors. The one I want to highlight here, a sacred vocation in teaching, learning, Christian discipleship, became in Spirit's creativity and tether something I had never intended or expected. It became a pathway of Christian discipleship that requires deepening spiritual friendships with those of other traditions or no tradition at all. Let me say that again. Christian discipleship, to be fully Christian, requires deepening intimate spiritual friendships with those of other traditions or no traditions at all. Now, this goes against the popular way of conceiving religion in our world, seeing religion in our world. I know that. Seminaries have shaped today's leaders to be very silo-oriented. Christians can only shape Christians. So rabbinics, Jewish populations have done this too. Muslims do this too. So it's not just a Christian thing, but we have created silo ways of understanding the force of faith and how faith opens. So it's not news that religious people gather most easily with their own. United is trying something a little bit new in the power of the Spirit, learning to become befriended outsiders, guests of others' wisdoms, Christians receiving hospitality and learning humility along the way that Jesus invites. We fail regularly, of course. This is why we love the language of Christian practice. But I find it a most hopeful way of being in a world primed only for what bleeds, or conceptually only for debate and division. This commitment instigates United's requirement for an immersion experience for each Master's of Divinity student, and this is intended as a living lab for students to integrate and live into their understandings of being disciples of Jesus in deepening intimate encounter inside a painfully divisive and pluralistic world. The faculty committed us to solely international and non-European locations, given that so many students of ours come from smaller town USA, and our curriculum is nearly wholly shaped by Western European thought and practice. Cuba, South Africa, and Israel Palestinian territories have been three options for these immersion experiences until the pandemic shut down global travel. This January, 2022, however, 24 students entered into a beautifully crafted, innovatively conceived virtual pilgrimage of the Holy Land. This was made possible by Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, who is the president of the Center of Learning and Leadership. He is also a dear spiritual friend with whom I have traveled for well over a decade now, traveled physically as well as spiritually and intellectually. I was initially unsteady about this idea of his. I mean, would it really deliver the curricular goals of the program? But then what choice did I have? This work is too important at United right now. I know we say Spirit's the one in charge, but of course I'm like, what if it doesn't work? Heart and mouth, we began. 2 rabbis, 2 Christian teaching elders, so 2 pastors, a Jewish educator, and 2 tour guides, 1 Jewish and 1 Palestinian Christian. We entered into the planning and implementation. You can read about it more at a blog that I write called reconsideringcitizenship.com if you're curious for more detail. I was stunned. I was delighted. And why was I surprised? Ye of little faith. The virtual pilgrimage accomplished 85 to 90% of the curricular goals of the program sequence. Participants came in with a sense of their model of encounter, their way, from deep study in the theologies of religious pluralism, some engagement with spiritual practices and other wisdom traditions, all held in devotion to Jesus Christ. They began to enter into the sites and spaces of the Holy Land, some via a GoPro camera with a tour guide on the ground, others with videos with additional teaching commentary brought in. The land began to speak to the participants, inviting them to encounter their previously unconscious assumptions about Scripture and their interpretation of Scripture. They got new lenses into our shared and often conflictual histories in that space across Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities. So many assumptions had to shift when seen and heard with the land as it actually is. As it could be seen in archaeological evidence, it became alive in the passions and questions and concerns of a pilgrim community. Other teaching voices were woven into the mix as well. The teaching team held spaces for the participants' questions and concerns, surprises, frustrations, angers, all of it, because it was a pilgrimage, as pilgrimages always are. Surprising, unexpected, frustrating, angering, hungry, tired, irritating, holy, sacred, communal, more. So what is impossible for us is never impossible for God, right? For those who love God, right? So our world needs religious leaders who can innovate, who can go on pilgrimage together without ever leaving their homes, perhaps, or without ever leaving their root traditions. United's contextual ministries curriculum starts with a spiritual formation of Christian leaders in ministry groups. We get a sense of the diversity of Christian expression and communion. But it concludes with this global capstone integrative experience that requires synthesis and integration. So the shaping of disciples of Jesus Christ need not be in its previously my way or the highway, imperialistic, exclusivist alone colonial practice that we can see in the history of our world. Shaping disciples of Jesus Christ becomes more and more real, more and more grounded when leaders can open to, welcome, even befriend more ambiguity in deeper humility, an irreconcilable difference within him or herself. We are all just paradoxes and contradictions, each one of us alone, and you bring that into a community. So how do we learn to see that as not faithless, but as intended and part of the transformative growth of the Spirit in each of us and in the community in our Trinitarian journey together? So this is intended toward the movement, toward the reign of God, in which these differences will weave the most grace-filled and salvific tapestry we could ever imagine. I'm glad to be at United, even as I recognize each of us here holds this work of shaping Christian leaders quite differently than perhaps I've spoken here today. That's precisely as God intends. Blessed be, and thank you for listening.